Hi, so my name is Mackenzie, and I wrote my research paper on same sex marriage and kind of how that uh, relates to our core democratic values, also how it relates to the, the core democratic values in Michigan as well, and how the laws have changed in Michigan since it becoming constitutional. So, that first question that we had to answer, so I didn't know much about the core democratic values of same sex marriage before doing this paper. However, I knew a lot about the legal background of um, same sex marriage, having contact directly with family members who have had to deal with um, the benefits and the not so good things about not being able to be married. Um, an aunt of mine was unable to receive benefits from her partner because of not legally being married to her partner. And unfortunately, her family had taken over those benefits. And but on the flip side of that, uh, another family member of mine was able to maintain custody or visitation with one of their children because it was written into their marriage, and the child was legally both of theirs. So it helped the child and helped the parents figure that out. They didn't have to go to court and fight or file lawsuits or anything like that for those issues. Um, but we have there's a lot of legal battles that were negative, but there's a lot of positives that came out of same-sex marriage, and um, also being gay, that I knew that the conversation ever came up with someone, if that conversation ever came up, that I would have to have that conversation with, that I may have to have that conversation with someone, that why same-sex couples should be able to be married. And I wanted to be as educated as possible. I feel like to have an argument, you should be educated. And the research that I was doing was research that I had already looked up and things that I had already knew, um, other than the core democratic values and how those relate to Michigan's law and how it related to this paper as well. Um, so much of this was on my own rights as well as family members and the legal background of it, just because of my family that has had to deal with those repercussions. My thesis or argument was that the United States Supreme Court made bans on same-sex marriage illegal due to the legal benefits being denied to same-sex couples, looking at the law without personal bias of opinion or religion, and referring to the core democratic values listed as they apply in the United States Constitution. So my argument essentially is that that same-sex marriage should be legal, and that also we should be looking at it the same way that our Supreme Court's going to look at it, which is by looking at those core democratic values listed in the Constitution, which is what the United States is founded based off of. So the law is not open, is interpreted without religion or personal opinion. Most people believe that marriage is a religious ceremony and should only take place between a man and a woman rather than a legal contract. My belief is that it's a legal contract, and that if you're entering into a legal contract, just like any other legal contract, you should know what you're entering into. But people being denied marriage or being denied rights that would be given to a spouse, or in some cases a parent, sometimes being towards the negative for a child involved, if there was a child involved, or some people were unable to have rights to things that were actually theirs because of it being in a person's name that wasn't necessarily their spouse and had no legal right to their things. So the core democratic values I did were liberty, the common good, justice, equality, and diversity. Liberty ensures that we don't have to worry about the impact of government on our rights. They're only going to step in with those things when they believe that your rights are being infringed upon. So the government being able to deny or approve marriage based on the social definition of liberty would go against our core democratic values. So the social definition of marriage is different than the legal definition of marriage, which is a legal contract. The common good focuses on what's best for everyone. So same-sex couples being able to legally marry creates less legal problems, such as lawsuits or families being torn apart because there was no legal standing for a parent who is in a relationship, or there was no legal battles between family members because it's now a person who's in a same-sex marriage has the same rights as someone who's in a regular marriage. So they still have all of those things. Their spouse's family, in the case that something happens, doesn't have the right to keep things that are theirs from them. Justice creates equality among citizens. If a heterosexual couple can marry, then a homosexual couple should also be able to marry. Equality due to the process listed in the U.S. Constitution, which tells us that every person should be created equal under the law. Since marriage is a legal document, it should be given to every citizen, and every citizen should have the right to marry as long as they're doing so legally and going through the right channels to do so. Diversity creates a more well-rounded society, which can ultimately create a better economy and more tolerance. Diversity can create conversations that may not have existed before and allow for more people to be more accepting, which is better for the common good. So in my career field, I don't know that same-sex marriage is necessarily going to have a large impact, except for that the legalization might be something that my students eventually will learn about, and it might be something that shocks them as much as possibly slavery does. I know that when kids learn that Black people were once owned by white people, they're really shocked by it. So I'm sure someday that, having the conversation of someone with two moms or two dads might not be as big of a deal anymore. I also think that the conversation of someone who has parents that are a same-sex couple, that conversation might come up. But other than that, I really don't think that my career field will really, there's not going to be very much of an impact on my classroom from same-sex marriage. Michigan's impact is the law is not one that everybody necessarily agrees with, and we actually were one of the states that had bans against same-sex marriage, and we did have lawsuits against the state for same-sex marriages not being legal. So, but Michigan now allows same-sex marriages, and they have the same-sex couple has the same rights as any other couple in the United States. So the last two questions, what for vaccines, what are waivers, who use them, and how do you qualify, and explain herd immunity. So there are waivers that people can obtain to have their child vaccinated or to not have their child vaccinated. The three most common are religious, personal, and medical. Religious waivers are basically stating that the child's religion does not agree with vaccinations. Typically, this is based on altering their state of being is usually the reason that for a religious waiver. The second waiver is a personal waiver, believing that the government, you have to be able to prove that you believe that you have your child's best interests in mind more so than the government, and you have to be able to kind of create or display that knowledge and those beliefs in the waiver that's given, and that is not given in every state. So there's a lot of states that actually don't offer personal waivers at all. Michigan does offer them. Michigan also offers religious waivers. And the third is medical waivers. So a person who is unable to be vaccinated, a person who cannot have a live vaccine. So those people that cannot have those vaccines have a medical reason that they can't have the vaccine. So herd immunity is that if so many other people around the person who is unvaccinated are vaccinated, then the person that is not vaccinated is less likely to contract the illness because everybody around them is vaccinated. So the illness isn't going to to affect them, or is less likely to affect them because they're protected. The people around them are protected by the vaccine. However, herd immunity is being challenged since so many people are choosing not to vaccinate their children now. And I think that was it.